Good morning, everybody. My name is Julia Hart, and most of you know me through my AULA serviced accommodation work that I've been doing over the last few years. I also have another business which is called Solluca, and we specialise in commercial property. I'm here today with a very good friend of mine, Jiggins from EXP Property Investments. He's really kindly come along to tell us and help us understand his property journey and give us a little bit of information or share with us his wisdom on property, because it's something that he's been doing for a long time and was really born into property, but I'll let him explain all about that. So just to give a little bit more of a background about myself, I started in property nearly 5 years ago now, which is absolutely amazing. I can't quite believe the time's gone so quickly. I'm a bit of a serial entrepreneur. I've done all sorts of different things throughout my career, from working in the fitness industry right through to working as a fundraiser, senior fundraiser for a charity. I decided to move into property when I met an amazing, very inspirational woman called Belinda Gresham, and I did a year's training course with her, and it's just rolled on from there. I moved into the commercial sector at the end of last year, so I've been doing a lot of learning on that front too. And I absolutely love it. It's a fantastic industry to be in. It's not easy, but it's great. So let me introduce you to Jack, and please tell us all about yourself, Jack.
Thanks very much, Julia, and lovely to be on the call too. So you say, yeah, like Julia said, I was born into property. Pretty much every family house that I lived in from a young age was built by my father. My dad was basically a builder and went into plant hire in the construction industry. My grandfather, on the other side, run his own construction company. So I was surrounded by people working in construction and property. I went to university, did business and marketing, but property dragged me back into what I loved doing. So I pretty much started on site as a jack of all trades, so doing near enough everything, which included, buying bungalows up, doing large sort of extensions to basically create a large, big 4-bed detached houses, and doing everything from the groundwork, all of the waste, water services, plumbing, electric, plastering, painting and decorating, carpentry work, roofing, everything. Was all in-house. So I've got a good understanding of on-site and how it operates. After successful flips in Oxfordshire with family and friends and JV partners, I decided to take on a project management contract in West London, which was a contract value of 7.5 million, which I worked very closely with a project management firm local to my home. After completing that, we set up EXP. EXP is the partnership of myself and Ben Richards. Ben, you may have heard of him before. He also runs his own architectural practice, Aura Architecture. But we set up our development business to be a young and dynamic business, and to prove that you don't have to have years and years of experience in the market to be taking on exciting schemes and creating good products. Currently, we're building out just over £3 million worth of assets, and we have an £8 million pipeline of assets we're buying. Second to that, I also run a small rental portfolio, which is like a co-living HMO business additional to that. But thanks very much for having me.
Fantastic. We did think that today we really wanted to talk all about why people get into property. We were going to talk about strategies and also about sourcing, all the different ways that you can source. So to kick off, really, I suppose the reason that I got into property was to give myself freedom, to give myself choice of the hours that I worked, to enable me to create a passive income. I wanted to really build that pension pot to enable me to create the life that I really want to live through my retirement. And I really feel that property has that to offer. I had this great vision of earning money whilst I was asleep. And property has really started to do that for me over the last few years, but it's not been easy. It's been quite a challenge, but it really has helped me change my view about working. I've met the most amazing people, and I really enjoy the work that I do. And I think property is something that you can get into at any point in your life. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter what finances that you have. There are always ways and means that you can move into the world of property. What's your thoughts, Jack?
Yeah, no, I completely concur with that. I suppose the reason I love property so much is it's incrementally taking on more and more responsibility, but you can build processes and systems. If I went out to someone that's in a day-to-day job and said, go and set up your own business, it's very daunting. There's not a lot of security. Your return on investment isn't necessarily guaranteed or alternatively asset-backed. So for me, it's a good way to incrementally step away from maybe the job that you're doing for a salary or being paid by someone else, and building a business which can support family, can support time away from work, which can pay the bills, which can support you. So I've seen firsthand my parents, they don't have really a pension as per se, but they do have some industrial units and some commercial units which they own, which are now paid off and paying them a really good income that far exceeds any pension pot that I've ever heard of paying out. And that's purely by being in the property world and investing in commercial property. It doesn't have to be commercial property, but that's just an example. And not only that, I've seen that business sort of be almost a family member. It's always there, sort of, doing bits around the family that we need to do, or if someone's in a gap of work or whatever it is in our family, it's always there and an asset that you can lean on. Whereas your job isn't that. There's not always job security. So for me, it's financial freedom. It's supporting family, earning in the sleep, replacing income originally, but now that's obviously the starting point. But then it goes into more of a business structure when you do go into it full time. I've got family over in America, so being able to sort of get up and go over there is another point for me. And also, I suppose for me, it grows with you. You learn more, you decide to adapt and tweak and change. And there are other areas you can go into the property sector. So it's flexibility and everything we mentioned above.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I was in my early 20s, I was encouraged to do something called contracting out SERPs, which meant that I will not get a pension. And we were all really encouraged to do this quite a few years ago now. So no, my husband and I, we don't have that pension pot. So we knew that we had to take action to really make sure that hole was filled. So yeah, and I think there's probably a lot of other people out there in the same boat as me, because we never thought that there would be a pension there for us waiting anyway. So we had to take action to because we took those choices in our younger years. So it's interesting why we're all here. But I think the next slide I think we're going to move on to is to do with different strategies, because there are so many different strategies in the world of property. You've got everything here. We've got buy-to-lets, commercial to resi, land, HMOs, commercial property, new builds, purchase lease options, serviced accommodation, rent to rent, mixed use, build to rent, flips, planning gains. There really is so much that you can choose to do. I started very much on the commercial to residential. That's where my training was. I looked at all sorts of different things to do with HMOs and purchase lease options. I decided as well to move into the serviced accommodation sector, because I felt that gave a good monthly return, because I was finding that the acquisitions that I was doing take quite a long time, so we really needed to plug that gap. So serviced accommodation, I think Jack put his toes into serviced accommodation as well, didn't you?
I did, yes. So when I set up the development business, I had a small pot of cash that I know I sort of didn't want to touch and keep there for sort of, well, a safety net as per se, and I invested it into service accommodation because it was pretty immediate income, not necessarily as tried and tested as other methodologies such as, you know, planning, HMOs and developments, because it hasn't been around so long, but it's a very intuitive way to get a quicker return on capital. So yeah, I did dip my toe into service accommodation, but also had a pretty clear understanding of what my sort of 5, 10, 15-year goal was, and I believe that should play a big impact looking back. So almost looking at forward and then hindsight into what you want to go into. All of these different strategies require a different amount of time, a different amount of expertise, and a different amount of finance and risk going in. So it's all about managing what you want and making sure that you can go into one or maybe more of what we have in front of us.
Yeah, I think you really have to ask yourself exactly what you want to get out of it. Start at the end and work back, really, because, you know, there are a lot of strategies and there's a lot of information and knowledge that that you need to acquire. So, and I also think in property, it's really easy to move around from strategy to strategy. An analogy that I've heard or used quite a lot is the shiny penny syndrome. So you're working on one strategy and then all of a sudden somebody pops up with an idea of doing something else, and it's very easy to lose focus. So it is quite important to choose your strategy, work on that, become the expert, really understand that field, and then you can expand from there, really. However, it is important that you really do think about what you want to get out of this and how much work you are prepared to put in. So, you know, serviced accommodation, it's talked about it being a very passive income. There's still quite a lot of work, especially if you're going to grow your portfolio. So you have to think about your time and how much time you want to put in it and what you want to get out of it at the end. Would you agree, Jack?
Yeah, and I think if you have contacts of people like Julia or myself that specialise in these areas, speak to them about what it actually entails. Quite often I speak to people that maybe have been misguided and think that it's possible to do projects in developments where you don't need to put any money in. That's a bit of a fad. There's always soft costs, there's always underwriting bank fees, there's a valuation, there might be a quantity surveying report. There's a lot of these soft costs which get hidden, and this is just an example in development, but you need to understand the bare bones of each strategy and what's involved. Like Julia mentioned, service accommodation can be fairly passive, and that's how my particular asset was, because I outsourced the management. But if you're doing the management, it's probably the least passive out of all these strategies. So make sure you understand end to end what sector you're going into and what it requires, and that it fits your model. You know, if you've got kids and you only have 2 hours a day, that should be a reason that you pick which strategy you want to go into. So it's whatever suits you, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think once you've chosen, you know, if you are really serious about what you're going to do, then you've really got to do your research. I think our next slide, Jack, is on the seriousness of what you need to think about when you start to choose your strategy and move on. So once you've decided that, you've got to, as Jack has already said, you know, find the person who you know that's been working in this field and they'll give you honest feedback, because there are lots of people out there that are doing lots of training, and you have to always remember that they have a secondary reason for giving you certain information, and I think it's very, very important to gain knowledge and to get education, or to talk to experts. You know, this is an industry where the training's not regulated, so you have to also think why people are giving you that information. I've been very lucky. I've worked with a great mentor, who is a wonderful lady, and I still work closely with her today. So I was incredibly fortunate. I've just been working on the commercial side with another very good mentor, and again, I did a lot of research into him before I decided to go down that route. And it's important that you do that research. And I know, Jack, you know, even though you were born into property, you still went out and sought that training, didn't you?
Yeah. So I did, you know, met multiple networking events. I invested in an annual training platform with, you could call, one of the bigger leaders in property training. I had two different mentors. One key thing I would say about mentorship, and my sort of advice on finding a mentor, is making sure that your mentor's best interest is you, and not the fee that you're paying them monthly to be on their mentorship. Because unfortunately there are people out there in the property industry which monetize from other people's learnings, but that's fine, but their main incentive needs to be the satisfaction they get from growing you and making sure that they're sharing that step-by-step process with you, then more so the monetary benefit of it. So I've had a couple of mentors, even still, and I actually classify both those mentors as friends now, because I've been fortunate to find the right people that resonate with me, and maybe see a little bit of them in me, and that's really important. So having the best interest at heart. But I suppose what Julia and I wanted to sort of ascertain from this is, it's all well and good getting excited about the strategy, but you need to make sure that you pre-qualify it with yourself and what's right for you. At the core centre of this, you do have to be selfish and think what works for me, and then obviously then you can go out and you know, offer your time for expertise or whatever it is, and be a bit, you know, promotional towards that particular sector. So for this, it's just making sure you understand, you know, really what you're getting into and what it requires, as anyone puts the right work into the right sector, and you will have success.
Yeah, and I think you've got to think about you and your character and your mindset, because it's not always an easy journey. You know, there are lots of ups and downs in property. So it's important to be working with a mentor who you connect well with, who's going to be able to help you through the difficult times, as well as you know, help celebrate the positivity. I really think you have to sit down and think about your mindset, think whether you feel that you need some work in that area, because there are other people, there are mentors as well that will help with that. And I think that's really important as well. You know, this isn't a get rich quick scheme. You know, you have to put the work in. It is all about hard work, consistency, and you've got to be able to keep going. And you know, you do see a lot of people that do start with a lot of gusto and want to go for it, and they do fall away. So you've got to think, right, well, what makes me different? And I think that's a lot to do with mindset. You know, I think Jack and we get on really well, don't we? Because we you know, we're really positive. We're always G each other up, and we always find a solution. We don't find any issues, do we? There's always a solution for everything that we face, and I think that's something we're quite good at doing, aren't we, Jack?
Yeah, no, I mean, fundamentally in property, you're a business owner, and it's not what happens to you, it's how you deal with it. So That's always something that I take away, and why, like Julia says, we get on well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next thing to do, of course, is define that area. I think the important things are to look for is what is the demographic. So when you're looking at your target area, you've got to think about how many people. So, you know, we always say a minimum of 250,000 people within that area. You've got to talk to agents. You've got to get a feel for the market. You've got to understand exactly what's going on in that market. So that's finding out what's selling really quickly. So what the market is demanding. So, for example, now we know that people want to move out of London, don't they? Because they're looking for space. So all of a sudden, the most prominent are obviously family houses, gardens, outside space. It is high up on people's agenda at the moment. So you have to really find out exactly what's happening in that area. You know, are you looking for a high yielding area, or are you looking for capital growth? Because people say, oh, you know, it's so much better to go and buy up north compared to down south. But you've got to think about what's right for you, what fits your strategy, and how far you want to travel. You know, I've done it myself. You know, Jack said to me, why do you always travel up to the northwest? That was where a lot of my work was going on, but it was a lot of travel. It was a lot of time. A lot of my energy was going in up and down, up and down. And he used to say to me, why don't you just work locally? Which I do now, much more locally anyway. So, and the other thing Jack always says to me is there's always deals on your doorstep, and they really are. It is about finding them, connecting with those right people, and building those relationships. And again, I think that's within our businesses, that's something that Jack and I are pretty good at, is building those relationships and creating the connections that you need. But when you're looking at that area, you've got to define it, know exactly what the strategy is, ask yourself, does this area need this strategy? Talk to the council, do as much research as you can, and talk to other people that are working in that area. Don't be frightened to talk to other people, because there's plenty out there for everybody. Do you think, Jack?
Yeah, no, you've covered it off extremely well. The analysis of your area is so key, because once you start buying assets or developments in a particular area, you will get economies of scale and good relationships with agents. And it's sometimes difficult to deviate from that, because there's just deals keep presenting themselves. So this decision also requires a lot of thought process. We specifically won't really travel within 2 hours from where we are. And additional to that, we've got another band of areas that we would look for planning, but it then doesn't go any further from that. The reason that we would look at areas further for planning is because you need to visit site less just to get a planning approved and maybe sell it on or let someone else deliver it. So we have a fixed band, and it's literally on a Google map. I can show you areas that we work on, and then areas that we would look at planning. Anything further than that, we just wouldn't even look at, and we may pass it on to contacts that work in that area. I think the population's a great one that Julia mentioned. We actually have less of a threshold personally than 250,000, but that just goes to show for what you need doesn't necessarily need to be what everyone needs or what Julia needs or myself. So analyse what you're going for. Our HMO portfolio is an area that has sub 50,000 people in it, and it's great. We love the area. Our yield is strong, so we're there. We're going against the grain with Julia's mandate, but we're getting what we want. So it's again analysing exactly what you need from a specific area. One touch point that I did want to come on to, which is the fourth bullet point, which is high yielding and capital growth. It's an absolute fad that you should be going up north to do deals that are more affordable, because if you're developing, the build costs are similar, but the price per pound square foot of what you sell at isn't. Therefore, it makes a profit margin really difficult to make it work past a point when you go north or outside of the affluent cities up north. So we actually tend to really focus in south of England, because we like areas that are above £400 a square foot, because we know that if we add an extension onto that building, everything we add should go for above 400 a square foot, and the build costs are not too different as if we did this in sort of Yorkshire as an example. But that's because we do development. Yielding is slightly different. The assets are cheaper, the rents are similar, and then you get a better return on your investment. So it's key to understand what your strategy is and where you want to go for that, and obviously account for your travel and how often you need to go there. Like Julia said, deals on your doorstep, there will be. They may require a bit more creativity or a bit more funding, which may just take a bit more work, but there will be deals under your nose, which I'm sure you can get to work with the right amount of skills and allocation, which will come.
Yeah, absolutely right. And the other thing I was just thinking, Jack, was how if you do once you have defined that area, I know Jack only does 2 hours. I mean, I sent you a deal the other day, didn't I? And I said, I know this is out of your area, but, and you came back and said, no, out of area. But, you know, so it does help when you are talking to people who, the agents and so on. You know, you need to have a clear brief. I think it is very important. Otherwise, you also get sent so much stuff that you really don't want to look at, and that's very frustrating. And it's harder to build relationships with people when they're sending you things that aren't relevant. So I think it's quite important to think about when you're talking to your agents, which is our next slide, Jack.
Yeah.
Is you know, make sure that you've written your criteria, make sure you know exactly what you're looking for, because if you go in and you are all woolly when you're speaking to them, then, you know, there's just no strength behind what you're asking. So therefore you are just going to get put on the mailing list, and they are just going to send out, and you will get fed up with looking at them, because that's the reality of what happens. So there are all sorts of different ways that we can source, and obviously agents is generally the first place that people do start. And you've got to look at Rightmove, because there are things on Rightmove. There are things that, you know, Jack and I might look at on Rightmove totally differently to anybody else. So there are deals on Rightmove, and that, you know, they're not always easy to find, but again, being creative, there are always things that you might spot that other people don't. So we've got Rightmove, we've got Zoopla. We talk about creating those alerts, making sure that you're picking up the information on a regular basis, so things are coming through to you quickly. There's a little app called, or a website called Mouse Price. Now that will help you give you sold prices and lots of other area information as well. You want to sign up to different web portals. So you've got propertyrenovate.co.uk, you've got Repo List, you've got two others, you've got Estates Gazettes here. You know, there are lots of different things that are out there. You've just got to Google it. Some of them you might have to pay a small monthly subscription to, but you will find that there's an awful lot out there. And then you've got to start thinking about looking for your motivated seller. So we talk about it as the 3 Ds, that's death, divorce and drama. So people that are looking to sell for a specific reason, you know, those people are really looking to probably get out of their property quickly. So you've got to think about how to find out what that information is, why those people are leaving, find out the story behind what's going on. And sometimes you've got to dig a little bit for that. On the commercial front, commercial agents, you know, are very, very different to general estate agents, completely different breed. But I actually find them slightly easier to deal with. However, they are slightly different, and they have to be dealt with in a slightly different way. But you need to make friends with people. This is a people industry. You've got to build those relationships. And of course, you have got lots of different types of people that you're going to meet. And being a good networker is important. That's how Jack and I met. You know, we met networking, didn't we?
We did indeed. You did indeed. Countless introductions and favours we've been working with each other, and potential deals as well. So networking is key, and you can get deals from your network. You never think that from the outset, but you can.
Yeah, definitely.
But I mean,
so female networking groups, I'm part of Propel, and of course Property Sisters, which is a fantastic network, a not-for-profit network where there's some incredible support on there. There are a lot of networks, I mean, not just female networks, but there is a lot out there, and a lot of help and support.
Yeah, I think you've covered it off perfectly. You can find projects in your network online. You've got to make sure that you have a good bandwidth on all of these, because they're not always as fluid as you may need. But another important thing is you've got to understand what you're getting paid for. So that might be, you might be adding value by it being a distressed sale, so the motivated sellers, or you might be adding value by seeing the scope of the plot. You can also add value in having a really good relationship with the agent. So all those areas you're adding value, and it's understanding that when you're looking at it.
Yeah, absolutely. So then we move on to the next sector that we do a lot of work in, which is, of course, off-market opportunities. So these are things that sort of run in parallel together. We do lots of direct-to-vendor letters. So we look for potential properties that could have those distressed sellers in. We look for reasons why a property could be selling. So for me, I look for leases that are coming to an end, and we write to those people. You can send leaflets, do mail shots. You can have a banner on your car telling people what you do for a living. There's, of course, lots of social media work that you can do, and that is growing unbelievably. LinkedIn is a great source. You can download the HMO Council list, which is free, and it's sitting on every council's website, so you can just go and pick that off and write to all those owners to see whether they're fed up with what they're doing and they want to potentially offer you a rent to rent or sell their current HMO. And they also, the council, have an empty house list as well, so that's something that's sitting there. And if they do tell you that they haven't got it, they do have to actually allow you to have it under the Freedom of Information Act. So it is important to know that, because sometimes they don't always want to release it if it's not on their website. You've got, of course, networking. You can talk to family. You've got a website that you can create. And I know, Jack, you have some landing pages, don't you, where people can just come up, when people type certain wording in, then you come up, which I think is a great idea. You can talk to architects, surveyors, planners. There are all sorts of on the planning portal. You can go and have a look at what's going on locally, because that might mean people want to sell their houses around large building works that are going on. And you can also find out about who's working in the local area, that's architects and surveyors, and just get out there, drive, look around. Once you start looking, everywhere you go, there's an opportunity, and that doesn't stop all the time, 24/7. We're always looking for opportunities, aren't we, Jack? And that they are constantly around. And this is an area that constantly needs work, doesn't it?
Yeah. Quite comically, I like the family one on there. I reckon I probably get a call from my grandma once a week telling me about like a little plot or something that she's read in the paper. And it's just like you say, telling people what you do. And then they're, technically just doing like work for you always, because it only takes a few conversations when they meet with their friend or someone else that they know, and then they make the introduction. Property is everywhere. Everyone lives in a property. So sharing is a key one, sharing what you do. And then all the obvious ones. So if you see a property that's got boarded up windows, there's a reason for that. Put a letter in. You can download the land registry title off Land Reg, just find it on the map, click it, and pay £3 for the address. If it looks like there's someone living in there, then you can just post into the letter there. But these are all things which are near common sense, really. It's just putting it into action too.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that I had actually a question from one of the property sisters, and she was asking me about when you approach a vendor, how do you secure that property? If you're going off and you're talking to a client or a customer, how would we go about securing that property? So what I would do is I would see if I can get what they call exclusivity. So I would ask that vendor if they would kindly allow me to have a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, however long that you think that you could potentially get, that they will allow you to do your due diligence, to talk to your client if that's what you're doing, to enable you to have the peace of mind to know that that they're not going to sell it from underneath you. You can also do what's called an option agreement. That's slightly more involved, but that is a potential possibility. So what would you do, Jack?
So it completely depends on what we're buying. Sometimes you have to have good faith in the, engage the situation. For example, if it's a house that's never been on the market and you've approached them off market, you've built a good relationship with them and they've given you sort of grace that you can look at the site. Sometimes we will take a few weeks of a view, but then and we will be completely open and sometimes exaggerate slightly what we're spending on it and how much time we're spending on it, because that makes it less likely for them to lose confidence that you're a serious buyer. Always, when you can, get it down on paper. So an option agreement is where they sign for you to being able to purchase their property for an agreed price over the course of an agreed period. An option agreement is a bit more serious, so you may struggle to get that across the line to get the exclusivity to carry out more due diligence. So I suppose the way that we tend to operate it is try and get it secured, whether that be subject to or whether that be unconditional, and then do your due diligence in between that process. Obviously, do as much as you can up front and make sure that your finger's on the pulse. But then there's a certain amount of due diligence that's associated with the site. So everything away from the site or the property, like values, scope, what can be done on that street if you've looked elsewhere, if there's scope out the back, or could you get a change of use? All of that can sort of be done preemptive, but then the actual nitty-gritty of the actual size of the building, the actual services that are coming in, is there any covenants which restrict you to do certain things? All of those things really need to be done once it's secured, and they should be accepting to that, because what you have to always remember is if they were to sell it to another buyer, that issue is still there. So the way we see it is, what do we need to do in between that period to almost like a bespoke due diligence? And normally we secure that by pushing it into the legal process. If you are in the legal process and they've sent you a contract, they're legally obliged to tell you if they've sent a contract to someone else, which is in the term of legals called a contract race. So as soon as we have a contract, we're happy to do everything, because we know that they have to tell us if they've got this out with someone else from a legal perspective. So that's one thing we tend to do, but normally we're just trying to get it under wraps and into the legal process. Option agreements, like Julia said, actually physically secures the site and you can flip it on or buy it. Lease purchase option is where you have an option end date, but you actually rent the site or the house until that point, but all the paperwork is solid from the outset. So that's another great way. That tends to work best if they're not time motivated, and you can offer them more money in a rental period and then a purchase, so you can de-risk the project between there and then. But all of the due diligence process isn't necessarily figuring out the numbers, it's de-risking it in our eyes. How can you de-risk this project, which is how we focus it. And obviously a big part of that de-risking is how can you spend time on it without it getting pulled or sold to someone else. So like Julia said, securing sites is a key focus point.
And I think, though, again, it comes back to what we were saying earlier about if you can find out what the story is, what their pain point is, and you're the person that's going to try and solve that issue, because that's what you've got to do. This is a bit of a puzzle. And if you can find out that pain point, you know what that issue is, and then you can offer a solution to that issue, then they're going to be far more interested in talking and discussing things with you than they are with anybody else. So, you know, I think, again, it comes back to good communication. It's not easy, and it certainly can't always be done, but Jack's a great one for saying, offer on everything, and something will drop. So, you know, you always stick an offer in, don't you, Jack? You know, whatever happens, you stick an offer in there, and then your sort of name's on the list. So it really, I suppose, is your choice, but I think there are just a few options there for you to think more about and potentially start to put into your armoury. And now the other question that I got asked about from the Property Sisters was about sourcers and compliance of sourcers. So now sourcers are a completely different subject, and we could probably do another whole chat on sourcers, but there are very different types of sourcers out there. And in fact, last year I spent quite a lot of time looking for good sourcers, and I generally found that once I came across sourcers, once I sent them my list of requirements, I didn't hear much back from them. I think I was potentially maybe asking for too much, I don't know. But there are a lot of very short weekend courses out there that people can do to become a sourcer. And I think it is important that you qualify that sourcer. And in my experience, I know that I found that if somebody is working in the industry, they're developing themselves, or they've done work themselves, then you are definitely going to get a lot better quality projects from that person, because they understand the fundamentals of what you're looking for. The compliance side, I've got put together a whole slide actually, so anybody that's interested in more information about the compliance side, I'll put it onto the Property Sisters documentation, so you can have a read. But from a top level, I know obviously they do have to be compliant. They've got to have registered with the specific thinking of what they're called. Jack, come on quickly, you remind me.
I mean, to be fair, when it comes to compliance, there's that normally I would look at, obviously, ICO related, so data protection.
Yeah, thank you.
They could be a member of the Property Ombudsman.
Yeah.
I think there's one main sourcing legislation that they should be part of as well, but I've forgotten it too.
I know, I can't. Now I'm saying.
Well, they can find that if that's something that someone wants, they can contact you for the full details on that.
Yeah, I'm very happy to share that, because I did look into it, and I have got a slide that I've put together. But it's nothing that we don't all of us already know, to be totally honest. It's pretty standard stuff, but it is important, because if anything does go wrong, it is important that they do have the correct cover, which is important. So that's really our end of our chat today. I hope that you've enjoyed it. Thank you, Jack, so much for taking the time to chat with me all about what you've done, and a little bit of a top line info on the industry, and maybe how to get started. So thank you very much for your time. And if anybody wants to contact me, obviously our details are on the screen. Jack, I'm sure you'd be interested to hear from anybody too.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, everyone, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you.